So, 10 years ago, I was 5 years into my testing career. And a few years before that, I decided to turn my attention to automation, which at the time was a tool called QA Run. Terrible tool. But it got me into the world of automation. And then I discovered Selenium. And I started learning Selenium. Became very proficient at it, started blogging about it, started hanging out with all the Selenium contributors, and kind of thought I'd reached the pinnacle of automating. And in my town where I lived in Nottingham, I took several jobs, like 3 or 4 jobs within the space of a few years, because I would go in, I would build a framework, I would get bored, I would leave, I'd go to the next company, I'd build them a framework, and then I would leave again. Until this one job, where I joined, and they lied to me. They told me that they wanted me to help with their automation efforts, and they did, but they kind of said, you're kind of free to do what you'd like to do. And I was like, oh, that sounds brilliant. So I got in this company, and they went, here, you can use whatever tool you like, but here's a pile of test cases. These are what we want you to automate. And 50 of them were physical pieces of paper. And I started automating like I would. I built my framework, I started automating all these tests, and this company had a nice culture, so I was hanging around. And my desk was in the very corner of the office, underneath a light that didn't work. And this is AI's representation of my desk. It looks quite like me, I'm quite impressed. But that job was the kind of moment I realized I was going in the wrong direction with automation. So what was happening was I was writing scripts. I was knocking out, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 automated tests a day from these test cases. And the numbers started to go up, like 300, 400, 500. And as I said, this was 10 years ago. The tools were nowhere near as smooth and as sophisticated as they are now. And about 3 months, 4 months into this job, my life became this. I would come into work, the build would have broken, I would fix the tests, I would go to lunch, I would come back from lunch, the build would be broken again, I would fix the tests, I would go home, I would come back into work, the build would be broken, I would fix the tests, and as I was doing that, I started adding a few more tests, and it was kind of like, I just assumed this was the norm, right? This is how it goes. More complex app that I was used to. And then the moment, light bulb moment was, I went to a meeting, and in this meeting, the product owner and CTO was like, so Richard, you've been testing this app, for the last 6 months. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I have not been testing this app. I have been automating test cases for the last 6 months, right? I have no idea about this app. And they went, oh, well, you're sure you do. So they proceeded to explain some crazy idea to me. And then they went, what do you think the impact of this would be? I have no idea. And yeah, but you've got all these tests. I was like, yeah, but they're all on this part of the system. And they were like, yeah, no one uses that part of the system. I was like, why did you give me those tests? And I started to realize that I wasn't in control of the way I wanted to test. I'd become kind of like a scripter. My job was to just take the input from other people and start to script. And it was the first moment in my whole testing career where I was like, I'm meant to be the source of knowledge. Not meant to be, that's what I'd always been. And I prided myself on knowing about the system. That was kind of my unique skill. And I loved being in the meetings going, oh, well, if you touch that, that's going to impact this and impact that. And in this role, I couldn't do it. And then to cement me leaving this job, so yeah, I left. But the final thing is why I left is quite a fun story. My CTO went to play golf. And he went to play golf with one of the marketeers from SmartBear. And my CTO came back with 3 licenses for Test Complete and told me that I had to now move all my Selenium tests to Test Complete. I didn't do that. But outside of that, I'd realized I was in this pattern of writing tests, but more specifically, end-to-end tests. That's all I was writing, full stack, all up and down the stack, across multiple pages. These tests were big, and they were brittle, but I didn't really know much better. But I knew it wasn't right, because I couldn't answer these questions. I knew it wasn't right that I should be coming in and fixing tests every day. I felt it had to be different, but I didn't quite really know how. So I went on a journey of learning, and as I said, that was 10 years ago now, and I was like, is it still the same today? And I decided to post on LinkedIn. I'm fortunate to have quite a lot of followers, so I posted on LinkedIn and said, hey, how many of your tests are on the UI, and specifically end-to-end? So I know now we can do super UI tests where we can mock everything, right? We can do lots of wonderful things now. But like 65% said, nah, most of our tests are still on the UI, end-to-end. And my recent projects, I've joined a consultancy recently, and I asked some of the other projects in there, I was like, what do your tests look like? Again, majority on the UI, end-to-end level. And there's 1 trillion posts a day on LinkedIn from people telling you how to succeed with UI. So it's clearly still very relevant. And then I was like thinking, why does this pattern still exist? Why are we 10 years down the line after me realizing this is not a great way to do this? And we're still in this position. And I think it's because it's comfortable. We're used to being on the UI, or maybe not, maybe people new to the industry aren't, but people who have been in for a while, we're very comfortable on the user interface. Most of our conversations tend to start on the user interface and work our way down when we talk about requirements. Tool vendors. Plethora of commercial tools with excellent marketing, such as AI-driven Wizard Cloud, AI Ops, Continuous AI Native, Agnostic, AI Synergy, Magic AI. I didn't make that up. I had a call, so I used to do a lot of like marketing with companies, and I had a call with someone, I'm not going to name them, and I recorded the call, and that was their introduction of their tool to me. Not those exact words, obviously, but in the space of 3 or 4 minutes, they mentioned all those words about this one tool that did end-to-end UI-based testing. And then the other side of it is, I think, management as a whole. I think management still, I'm not blaming them, but they still have a very traditional view of how testing and maybe automation could be. And I think it's our fault. I'm going to talk about that, but I think a lot of it is our fault. I don't think we're very good at educating and sharing the actual effort that goes into doing automation really well. Or they go and play golf with marketers. So I want you to imagine with me, imagine if you could snap your fingers, clear all those mental blocks, and get all the answers you need to break these cycles. So let's try it, okay? I'm going to count to 3, and we're going to click our fingers, okay? 1, 2, 3. Oh, answers. Yeah, the answer. There's the answer right there. So the answer is AI. So with AI, we can create more targeted tests. We can create our test data faster. We can run all our tests on different machines. We can use AI to make those tests easier to communicate to our managers. We can eliminate flakiness. We can auto-heal our tests. We can do lots of wonderful magic with AI. And AI doesn't stand for what you think it is. If you thought I was talking about AI, no, come on, I'm talking about automating intelligently. AI can't do any of those things yet. AI is incredibly helpful. But I think most of us now, if we brought AI into our teams properly, it would cause a lot more disruption than actually learning how to benefit from AI. I think a lot of teams are still in an immaturity when it comes to utilizing automation. You bring AI in now, you're just going to cause disruption, and it will guide you down a path that you don't really understand. So I'm not saying AI is not going to help. It is definitely going to help. But I think we need to know what to ask it, right? So Manu mentioned... Chris mentioned earlier trying to get a picture out of AI. And it took him 12 attempts to get this picture of a sandcastle, right? If we don't know how to talk to it, we're going to struggle. But then also, if we don't know what we want, or what we need, or what we're looking for, we're going to struggle to talk to the AI. Or what we'll do is accept its output and just go, oh, yeah, let's see if it works. Oh, it works. Commit. What I would like us to do is to automate intelligently. And after this experience I just shared, I went on a journey for the last 10 years of trying to really learn how to automate well and how to communicate that to other people. And I'm going to try and share some of that with you. And I tried to make this look like Apple. I failed miserably. But you know, when Apple did their whole demo and they didn't mention AI once, they just mentioned Apple Intelligence. So I'm going to go through some sections. And I'm going to start with automation, right? What is it? So I've also been to many interviews where they say, Richard, we want you to do test automation. And I'm like, that sounds like the start of a great conversation. I wonder what they're going to want me to do. I wonder what their problems are. I wonder what their context looks like. I wonder what their product does. And it's like, yeah, we've chosen Playwright. Oh, why? Just what all the cool kids are using. It's like, yeah, but what problems do you have? Well, that doesn't matter. You'll work it out, right? You'll just use the tool. Or it could say Selenium up there. It could say Cypress. It could say literally anything. But the fact that they've already chosen the tool for me is a problem for me. Or you see job specs that say, we're introducing automation into our company for the first time. Must have 10 years experience of Playwright. What? No, it's not even that old. And also, why have you chosen the tool? You're not an expert, right? You're bringing me in to do that. So I find it fascinating that when we talk about, quote, test automation, for some people, that's a tool. Or for some people, that's a very specific layer. So this is quite interesting, and it's funny because we've got ISTQB on the board, or the Hungarian testing board. But they used to have a definition that I actually liked, and that's quite rare. So they had test automation, the use of software to perform or support test activities. And I loved that. And this afternoon, when I was finishing slides, I went, I'm going to get a screenshot of that. So I go to their glossary. It's not there. They've changed it. They've changed it to this one, the conversion of test activities to automatic operation. Well, that sounds very fancy, doesn't it? Sounds like something that you just build and leave, right? It's going to operate itself. But again, mentions the word test activities. Got me curious. So why have we ended up with this obsession with UI-based end-to-end tests if we're always automating test activities? And there is far more test activities, right, than writing test cases or running test cases. But the problem is, and some of you in the room will have been around when this was happening. It was, I don't know now, Alan Richardson claimed it was about 12 to 15 years ago. He said, all testers did was run test cases, log bugs, and then tell people that I've ran test cases and I've logged bugs. That was their day. How many test cases did you do? 40. Well, it's less than yesterday. Oh, well, one of them was quite big. How many bugs did you find? Oh, I found 20 today. 20! Yeah, well, Dave did all the code. Happens. But we used to talk about test cases. So when these tools came along, open source and commercial tools, as far as a lot of managers thought, all we did was run test cases. And then they came along and said, here's some tools. You can use the tools to run those test cases. Well, that sounds magical. And then people started using those tools. And you can use the tools to run those test cases, but it's not the same. You lose the serendipity of having someone run those test cases. You lose that inquiry or how the test case got created in the first place. We lose a lot by running test cases, but I think it's happened because traditionally test cases are written from the UI. And then it came a case where, well, we can't keep running these manually. Let's automate them. And this is kind of, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but I don't like the word test automation. I think it's a loaded term in our industry now. I think it means very specific things to very different people. To some people, it means automated testing. To some people, it means the use of software to support testing activities. To some people, it means Selenium or Playwright or whatever it may be. I think the term's lost its way, and I don't think it can be recovered. Not for the framing of this talk per se, but for me, I like to talk about the use of software to support testing activities. And beyond running test cases, test data creation, analytics, writing reports, pulling down, Srini mentioned yesterday, pulling Google, app reviews down from the App Store and analyzing them. We can spin up environments. We can learn how to do all sorts. How many of you use a Chrome extension, right? That's a piece of software that's helping you do your testing activities. There's so much more than just writing tests or automated tests, and I don't think people fully appreciate it. And even though I'm a bit, again, not against AI, I'm skeptical of AI, I think that's going to help this transition. I think people are very willing to use AI and accept its output, and now they're turning to it as the first place to go. And I love that mentality, and I think we need that more of what testing problems have I got? What can I build to help me solve those problems, alongside automated testing? So to start with, we need to talk about strategy. I'm sorry, I know it's the end of the conference, but we have to talk about strategy. Strategy is the foundation of any successful testing activities and especially any successful automation implementation. So to talk about strategy, we need to talk about triangles. So that's a lot of triangles, right? So everyone decided to do this. This is the automation triangle, and it became very famous because it tried to explain how to go about doing automated tests, although it didn't. So they're very pretty, but they're not pyramids for a start. They are definitely flat, and they never really shared how to actually go about doing it, because I think if they did, and I'm not criticizing the person who made it, but if they did, then why are we in this space that we're in now? And maybe some of you don't think we are in this space, and maybe you're not, because I'm not in that space anymore, where I'm in the team I'm on, but a lot of teams are, where they're just solely writing end-to-end automated tests. And I think it's because these triangles weren't as descriptive as they needed to be. So we put numbers on them. That's going to help, right? So let's put some percentages on there. That's going to help people fully understand, how to implement the pyramid. And we'd say 10%. Why not, right? Whoever did that, I'm pretty sure they just spun a number and went, yeah, 10% sounds good. Let's put 10% up there. And then we started putting scales on, right? Because we all know tests on the UI are incredibly brittle, right? No, they're not. If you write them well, or you know how your system works, I've probably seen more flaky API tests in some projects than I have on the UI. And it depends on your complication of your UI. So I am criticizing the pyramid. And it's not a good strategy because it lacks context. It lacks any meaningful insight into how you work. Now, you could use this as an heuristic. So we heard about heuristics from Alex. You could use this as an heuristic to say, are my tests looking good? And you could be like, well, no, my pyramid looks like a T, right? But maybe that's the best you can do in your environment. And I think it's important that when we think of a pyramid, firstly, they have 4 sides. Well, not all of them. Well, mostly. Depends how old it is now. It might have 5 or 6, depending on what the weather's done. But anyway, pyramids tend to have about 4 sides. But the best pyramids are the ones that have rock-solid foundations. And those foundations are where I think we need to talk about strategy. If you're going to build a pyramid, even if you love that model and that concept, you need to know what you're building on. And in order to do that, we need to look at our context. We need to look at testability. We need to have goals. What's our goal? When I joined that project, my goal was to automate all the test cases. There was one other person on that team that spent their day writing test cases. When would I have finished, right? As soon as I'd finished, they wrote more. And then they carried on, right? It's an ongoing cycle. So what's a sensible goal? The goal I took that job was, I can write all your, mate, I can write 40, 30 test cases a day. Just set me a desk and I'm going to go to town. And I genuinely thought I could do it. And then we need plans. How are we going to attack this? So here they are. So what is context, right? Context for me is the facts. Factual information about the team we're on. Our product is a React app. It's got React Native. It's hosted in Google Cloud. There's 10 developers. 2 of them hate unit testing. 8 of them like it. 2 of them watch Star Wars, and the other 2 like to annoy them about Star Wars not being Star Trek, or whatever, right? Like, use to understand your context. We release 4 times a day, or we release once a year. We're heavily in the compliance space. We can only do certain things. We're only allowed to use this tool because it takes 10 years to get any tool approved by security, right? All those things matter. So when we hear things like, you should always use tool A, well, what if I can't? What do I do then? Have I failed? I don't think I've failed. I just need to adapt to the context. And then we have testability, which is what I just said there. It's how those facts impact your ability to test or your ability to automate. So we're all different. We've all had different experiences. Having a lockdown security policy to some of you might mean, well, you can't do anything, right? That's it. I can't use another tool. I'm going to have to use that tool. For me, that means I'm taking that person to the pub, and I'm going to buy them some beers. And we're going to talk about how that tool's not suitable for me and how I would really like it if they would approve this other tool. And then they're going to go, ooh, another beer. And then if that doesn't work, I might give them a cookie. There's different ways to approach the different problems. So it's all how you interpret those facts. And then, as I said, what are we trying to achieve with goals, and how do we plan to go about doing it? We need to have this foundation to even start attacking automation and doing it effectively. Without it, we're just going to go to town and start automating. Excuse me. So I think one of the other areas that we have problems with, or that I see lacking, and evidence from this is when I do this activity in training courses, I don't think we have as much system knowledge as we need to have. I think a lot of people still treat everything below the UI as a black box. And I think we're getting better, but I think now we've gone to the next level. It's like, oh, there's an API call, that's great. And then we look at the API call, but then we're not looking at what's going on inside that API call. What's going on inside that API call, and then how does it end up in the database? What third parties are we calling? I feel we need to get really in-depth now at learning how our systems work, especially when we love a UI automated test, because they're very brittle sometimes. Because when you make a call, what's going on underneath inside that black box? So this is a very noddy application. You click login, and you get taken to the rooms page, right? Very simple. Most of you probably have a UI login test, right? But actually, what happens when you click login? Or what happens when you load this page? On this app, React goes, oh, hello, I'm going to render that page for you. And then I fill in the form, and then I send it. And then React goes, oh, you want to make an API call? Oh, great, I'm going to send that to this API. And then the API goes, who are you? Do I trust you? Oh, well, you've sent me some information. OK, I'll take it. And then it passes your information, and then it goes to the DB and goes, does these match? Yes, they do. It goes, hey, you need a token. What kind of token? I don't know, but you get a token. Goes back to the UI. React goes, ooh, I got a token. It's my birthday. And then it goes, oh, I'm going to send you to this page. And then it renders the next page. Lots can go wrong in that flow. But now we know that they can go wrong, we could potentially code around it, or we could decide this is not a great test. But if we don't do that, and we just think click next, and wait for the page to load, WebDriver.wait, wait for the logo to appear, right? The logo's on every page, right? The logo's on the 404 page, right? As soon as that fails, yeah, it's still waiting, right? So we need to understand our apps, we need to observe them to be able to design better automation. And I think currently, we're getting better at it, but I think we need to do more, especially later on when we'll talk about automating down the stack. So the next category that I put on there is education. And I think it's, as I mentioned, joking about how we don't really share what we do as testers. I think we have a massive problem, again, where we're not educating people around us, especially managers or C-level people, about the value of automated tests or why we have them in the first place. And for me, it's knowledge confirmation, right? So I saw the system do A, and that made Richard very happy. And I want to know if the system never does A again, because that will make Richard quite sad. So I'm going to write a test to check that for me. So it's not, I'm not going to get into a debate about checking or testing. You can call them whatever you like. But for me, it's I know the system does something, and I want to know if it ever changes. And I'm going to write a test to do that. Now, in order to do that, if you look at not any, but most job specs around an automator, you will see build a framework, know a tool, know how to write reports. You will not see how to identify risk, how to design a good test, how to learn about the system in order to implement the test that they need. And often we're not training those skills either. And again, I think if you design bad tests, you're going to get bad knowledge confirmation. So I think we need to get better at that. But the whole purpose of tests is to go, what you think the system does, it still does it. Well, that's great. Thank you very much. And when you write these tests well, we get the metric that the only real metric I use for my automated tests is mean time to feedback. How long is it taking me to get to this feedback? And the reason why the feedback matters is every single one of you will have done this. The build goes green. And we're like, oh, green, happy days. No more work to be done, or maybe I'll do a little bit more, right? Or I'll do a little bit more testing. And that testing that you do then is 100% influenced by the fact that that build went green. Now, if the build went red, every single one of you goes, oh, might have to have a look at that. Might have to go and have a look at this area. We'll fix the test, right? We always fix the test. But we then need to think, oh, what else could go wrong in that area? I didn't think that was going to happen. Or if you're sometimes quite smug, which I like to do sometimes, you've worked on a piece of feature, and it could be a developer or another tester. I don't do this all the time, just sometimes for humor. But you know a test is going to fail because they've not fixed it. So you could tell them, obviously, and sometimes 99% of the time I will, but the other percent of the time I'll go, I think your build's going to fail. And they go, no, it's not, no, it's not. Oh, well, we'll see. And then it fails, and then I go, look, it failed. And then I tell them why it failed, or they'll tell me why it failed, and then we'll have a discussion about how they could avoid that. But that feedback then took longer. It took longer to get there, so we need to always be aware of our actions when we fix tests, add new tests, refactor, to keep this mean time to feedback down. And there's general rules. I think most people are saying they aim for 15 minutes. Whose build takes less than 15 minutes to run all of your, whatever it does, all your tests? Anyone less than 15 minutes at the moment? Wow, 30 minutes? An hour? No one wants to play. It's the end of the conference. So ideally, people want to try and get it down, but the fact is, the quicker it is, the quicker you can make decisions, and that's what we need to do. The sooner we get the information, we can make an informed decision about should we ship, should we not. And as I just mentioned there, what do our tests tell us? So a lot of us, maybe not in this room, but in our industry, think green means okay, right? If the build goes green, we can release. Or if the pipeline might automatically release because it went green, and sometimes that's okay. But really, it can also be an illusion. Green means nothing's changed. That's what it means. It means the knowledge you had and the way the system is now still satisfies that knowledge. It means nothing's changed. But Dave's just refactored a whole component that was 5,000 lines long and turned it into 12, right? Is he a magician? Is he magic? Or were our tests not as good as they perhaps were? So sometimes green means things are okay, and that's usually okay to go with that route, but sometimes we're being fooled, and sometimes our tests might not be as good as we want. I keep a track of one key metric in my automation career. I have written 8 tests that can never fail. Never fail. Impossible for them to fail. I haven't quite yet written a search true equals true, but I have written methods that will never return anything different. And we don't want to do that, because then I think it's doing something that it's not. And then finally, in the education space, and you're all at a conference, which is amazing, we need to keep aware of the latest tools. Because if the more tools we're aware of, the more options we have to automate our tests. If everything looks like a UI test, it's always going to be a UI test, right? If everything looks like a hammer, if you've only got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we need to have more tools at our disposal. We need to play around with more tools. I like to do 15-minute experiments, if I can. I will download a tool, and if I can't get it to do what I want in 15 minutes, that's probably not a tool for me. When I say do something, I mean like, can I open a website and fill in Google, right? Something as simple as that. Or can I make an API call? But the more tools we're aware of, the more options we have for when we analyze our testability. And at the moment, I think people are particularly specializing on a single tool, especially on the UI end-to-end side. Excuse me. So one of the things that I do around tests, or the things that I've done in my own career, is I like to make models and mnemonics to help me remember how to design good tests, or how to think about automated tests. So I came up with one that was TRIMS, and it stands for targeted, reliable, informative, maintainable, and speedy. I wanted it to be fast, but that was TRIMF, and it's not as appealing. So I ended up with TRIMS, and then also my brain went, that's quite good. If you've got massive end-to-end UI tests, you should trim them and make them nice and small. And I stuck with that. I quite like that. I was very proud of that. But I'm going to go through these 5 characteristics of really good automated tests. And I think you can compare them to end-to-end testing. It might give you some ideas of potentially how you could improve some of your tests. So the T stands for targeted. And it says the test needs to be targeted to a specific risk. Richard, you said the R word at a conference. No one talks about risk anymore. But yeah, targeted on a specific risk and automated on the lowest layer your testability allows. So I'm going to try and break that down. So firstly, we want to target a specific risk, which means we need to get better at identifying risks. For example, can the user log in? Right? That is a risk, but it's quite big. Right? There could be hundreds of reasons why a user could not be able to log in. So we need to try and make them a little bit smaller so we can target them in our tech stack. And then automated on the lowest layer. Now that layer is your system knowledge, how you know your system works. But also, it's impacted by your skill. So if you don't know how to write a unit test and no one in your team is willing to write that unit test for you, you can't mitigate that test on the unit level. So you might have to go up to the API level. Maybe you don't know how to do API tests, so you go back up to the UI level. So you still may end up at the UI, but you're doing it intentionally instead of the default behavior of going to the UI and working our way down. So that's what I mean by the lowest layer you can. And also, you might not have an API. You might still have an old client server, another approach, or it might be some other archaic technology, right? You might not be able to do it. And that's OK. That means you might not be able to have a pyramid or a triangle, right? You might have to have a different shape. But you're doing it knowing, you're doing it with intelligence, and you're doing it with able to explain that narrative to your managers and peers. And here's an example that I tried to add back to this login scenario. So click the login link. What if there's no login link? Can't click it, right? How could we test that? We could test that right down at the component layer. We could test that in about 10 milliseconds, right? Or we could spin up a whole browser, check that there's a login link on the page. That's probably going to take 2-3 seconds. But then if you did that for hundreds, thousands of tests, that's going to add up to a lot of time. So if we know what the risk is, we can work out where to do it. Does it build the right page? So I've clicked the link, but am I now getting the right theme, the right page? This app is React, as I mentioned, so there's a component. I can test that component. I could do a snapshot test of that component. I could see that it works independent of the whole full web page. Oh, but Richard, what if it doesn't work on the whole web page when there's 10 components on the page? Oh, OK, well, then I could do a different test for that because there's different risks. What if we're sending it to the wrong API? Or what if we've designed the JSON wrong? I could do an API test. I could do a contract test. There's lots of different ways I could do it. And all the way down to the bottom, I could talk to the unit test or the DB. The point is, when you log in, and this is a very niche app, well, not niche app, it's a very specific designed app, but in your own apps, what happens? And can you test those things in isolation of doing it all the way up on the UI? And in order to do this, we need system knowledge, we need tool awareness, we need to be able to think of it as, my old colleague Mark used to talk about as a mosaic. He used to say we need a mosaic of test cases. We don't just need one picture, we need lots of little pieces that are going to form the bigger picture. But the best thing around this, and Manoj mentioned it earlier in his talk, we now have tiny tests that ideally will be well named. They'll be very clear what they do. There'll be like only a handful of lines of code in them. The data that they need or the state that they need will be tiny. And they're really easy to debug. They're easy to maintain. Instead of having, I don't know, hundreds of lines of UI tests, or if you really don't like your life, you could have, a Gherkin file with 50 lines in it, right? That says and 1,000 times. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Gaspar will come and find you. And he lives here. All right, so, but if you do it well and you turn it upside down, well, look, you get pyramids or multiple triangles. But in all seriousness, if you view your stack as vertical slices, and we think of it as a risk around that area, so instead of going this way, I feel we need to start going this way and build up that picture in hundreds of tiny, smaller targeted tests, because it's going to enable us to, first, when they fail, know what they do, but also be really targeted with our tests. And utilize, one thing I've not mentioned is, and I didn't plan to mention it, but I'm going to because I've started talking now, is a lot of people who automate in this room, you have incredible skills. Like, you've learned a lot of engineering principles, solid patterns, encapsulation. You know how to code. Yet for some reason we go, I only do Playwright. I only do Selenium, or I stay in that box. You could build websites if you wanted to. You could make API calls. You could do whatever. Even now with ChatGPT, just get that to do it for you and take all the credit. But we're able to do more of those things, but I don't think people realize it. And also, if you learn one tool, you've basically learned them all. The only thing you've not now got is you don't know that specific API, but you know how to do UI testing. You know how to do API testing. You just chose to do it with Postman, or you just chose to do it with Playwright. You can easily pick up any tool, but sometimes we stay in our lane, and I don't think we should. So trims, reliable. To maximize value, checks need to avoid flakiness and to be deterministic. Who tests their tests? That's like turtles all the way down, right? Where'd you stop, right? Who tests your tests? But we should test our tests. I've committed tests that can never fail, but usually, if it's a UI test, I'll run it on my local machine 2-3 times to make sure it's stable. And then I'm going to deploy it into a box where it's going to run on a $2 a day instance in AWS instead of my £4,000 MacBook Pro. But that's not a problem, right? It will still work. But we need to test our tests. We need to test that they can fail. We should reverse our assertions, make sure they can actually fail. We should see if they're reliable. But one thing we can't actually do is we can't avoid flakiness. It will always be there. It is impossible to avoid. There is too many permutations. If you like reading, Meta did a case study where they spent millions and millions of pounds trying to build an anti-flakiness tool that would take tests out of the pool. It would look at them, analyze them, fix them, and put them back in again. They canned it and just said, we can't avoid it. It's just, that's it. We'll try and make better tests, but we can't avoid flakiness. And yet we're obsessed with it, right? You go out to vendors, auto-healing, auto-fixing, right? They don't know what they're fixing, right? They're just looking for a different locator most of the time, but what if other logic had changed? It's dangerous, so we need to smaller our tests, the more reliable they are. Informative. Passing and failed checks need to provide as much information as possible to aid exploration. So when a test passes, or you're looking at a test, or you're refactoring it, we always look at the name, right? Regression testing down, it was a long time ago now. Got the regression testing down to about half a day. 10 days to half a day just by creating test data creation, right? And then I went to the change management board. We had a change management board. How many days do you need to release to do regression testing on this next sprint? You know what, just give me a day. It only takes half a day. Well, give me a day for contingency. And they went, no, we'll give you 10. I was like, no, I don't need 10 anymore. Yeah, I know, but if I give you less, I'm going to have to move them. And then I'm going to have to move that. And I'm going to have to do this. And I was like, what? So I took the 10 days, and I spent 9 of them improving the app to make it more automatable. So that's how automation can be used outside of automated tests. And again, based on testability. So let's get through this for some questions. And the last model I wanted to share is sacred. Again, you can tell I love mnemonics. This mnemonic originally was scared. Realized that wasn't as appealing to people who wanted to learn how to automate well. So I changed it to sacred, and I like the idea of these sacred little tests that we hold precious to us. Going to fly through this one. State management, test data, config flags, deployment, all the things that you need. An automated test is basically actions on a certain state. If you can't control that state, then it's going to be really hard for you to automate. And that's why I'm not going to say I dislike a lot of the off-the-shelf tools, but a lot of the off-the-shelf tools, or not even that. When you're told to use a very specific tool, none of these tools are able to control your state. They can click the screen and they can make calls, but they're not programmed to talk to your database and put test data in there or turn feature flags on and on. We have to still build that ourselves and then connect these tools together. And state is by far the hardest thing to do in automation. Controlling your app or your website is the hardest thing you need to master. A stands for actions. What do you need to do? Click a button, fill a form in, send an API call, whatever it is. Codified Oracle is a fancy way of saying assertions. If you're not sure what an oracle is, it's a fallible way of identifying a problem. So a quick reference I have is I used to go to the gym. I know, don't shout. I used to go to the gym, and the swimming pool at my gym, the door handle was up here. And it used to baffle me. It's like, why is the door handle up here? And the door handle's up here, so kids can't open the door and fall in the pool. Oh, what a brilliant door. I love this door now. What an amazing door. I now have a new oracle. If I now go to a swimming pool and the handle is at normal height, I'm a bit annoyed now. I go and tell them, I go, one of these annoying people, your door handle should be higher. Did you know? But that's an example of an oracle. And when you get people doing those kind of behaviors, because in their head, there's a certain way things should be, and that's an oracle. And when it comes to automated tests, we codify our oracles. We've seen a button on the page or a successful message, or we've seen data in the API call that says it was successful, or a status code, or whatever it may be, and we go, that tells me that the system has worked correctly. And then we codify it. And here's a very quick example on the website. This is a brilliant blog that no one blogs on anymore, but I wanted to highlight when my next training course was. So I wrote some CSS, made that next training button red, and I wrote a Selenium test. I'm not picking on Selenium, let's change my language. I wrote a UI test that checked that next training button was there and that the right event was on the screen. Brilliant test, very proud of it. Ran the test, passed, happy days. Good testing, Richard. Released my website, boom. I missed the bracket off my CSS file. So, great test, right? Test worked, right? How many of you have got UI-based tests that check that text is on the screen? Oh, but Richard, you should use visual testing. Yeah, I should have. I should have gone, what risk am I trying to mitigate here? Is it that it's the right event? Or is it that it's in the center of the screen and red? They're not the same risk. They're very different, and different risks require different tools. But I didn't do that. I went straight to my default tool. Reporting, big topic. We've heard a lot of talks around reporting, but we need to tell people tests have passed, right? We need to tell people tests have failed. We need to also get our tools to generate reports for us, so we can go and put them in a massive database now that no one looks at, but that's what we do now. Put it all in a database, we can run analytics on it, right? We can find out how many tests fail. But we need to do that reporting because it is useful information. But we also need to get our robots to give us as much information as possible. And I call it giving your robot a voice. My automated tests are my little robot army. That's how I view them. They go off for me, they go to war against my web application, and they come back and go, hey, here's some information. And I go, fantastic. But that information is crucial to help me make decisions. Execution, we need to think about this because, again, where are our tests being executed? Against what environment? Is it always going to be the same? Should they run on test environment, right? We've all got a test environment. Or should they run on test 2? Or should they run on staging? Or should they be able to run on prod? If you know that at the start, you can design your tests to be able to do that. Or do you know where they're going to run? Are they going to run on a slow cloud, or are they going to run on a tiny box in the cloud? You need to know that to be able to do it effectively and avoid some of the flakiness. And then finally, we need them to be deterministic. It's kind of obvious, but the whole point of having an automated test is it does the same thing over and over again. When I mentioned we moved from test cases to write automation and we lost elements, we also gained some elements. Automation is brilliant at not being distracted. It's brilliant at not going, ooh, what's that shiny button do? And then spending 2 hours exploratory testing over here for no real reason whatsoever, just because it looked nice. They don't do that, right? But they also, what they do is they work 1,000 times quicker than us, and that can also be problematic. So we need them to be deterministic. So I mentioned the end game, and when will the end game end? And when I say the end game, I mean this fixation on end-to-end tests. I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. And the reason is we are all on a scale of like maturity with automation. There's people who still don't have any. And they're probably going to start on the UI, and they're going to go through the same journey we've been on, or I've been on. There's people who are going to start right over here where the developers are starting it, and a developer will probably write more lower-level tests because they're more comfortable in that space. They're not comfortable on looking top-down on the UI. So I don't think it's going to go away, but I think if we automate intelligently and we take advantage of AI, no, don't delete that bit, but if we take advantage of AI, we can turn them into assets that really bring value to our team. So if you didn't notice, the mnemonic down the side is assets, because I love mnemonics. And yeah, by the way, I tried to make my slides look like a website, so you can tell I'm never going to be a designer. And thank you all for listening, and thank you for the power cut.
You do know you're my hero, right?
I'm your hero?
Yes.
Woo!
Okay.
Used to be someone's hero. Oh, and I've got a podcast. Oh, it's gone. But there's a podcast up there. Oh, there you go.
Wow, that was cool. Okay. Would there be benefit in R&D/product manager spending 1 month per year as part of the team?
Yes, no. Again, if you're in a context you can do that, I don't see it being a bad thing. I think you're only going to gain educating each other on what's possible around automation, especially with some product owners, for example. You know, when you ask for testability or you ask for this little hook to be built so you can create data easily, it's really hard to add in retrospectively because they're going to say no because they want the new shiny button. So I think if you get an understanding together and working, again, I mentioned educating, then I think it will definitely be beneficial. Maybe not 1 month a year, but I think regular check-ins where you say, by the way we built that story kind of made it hard for me to test. Do you think we can do that differently in the future? It's going to make life, both of you, easier, I think.
Thank you. What is your advice for a tester who just started working on automating test cases?
Leave. No. In all seriousness, I would really encourage you to look at that test case. Is that a test case that needs to be automated? Is that test case still going to bring value to what you're doing? And try and decipher, when that test case was written, what risk do you think that person was trying to mitigate? And it might not be obvious, but have a look at the app yourself, see if you can spot different risks, and then automate a number of tests that satisfy that overall risk. I really strongly encourage you not just to automate the test case outright, because that, especially if a lot of the time these test cases are written years ago. The system looked completely different when that test case was written. And also, no one will have updated it. That's the other thing that I forgot to mention. No one updates test cases, right? We all know how to run that test case. Richard, here's test case, 1, 2, 4. Oh, yeah, I know 1, 2, 4. Pass, right? Don't even read what it says, right? I just run what I think is correct. So yeah, definitely get to know the system and do your own analysis of where you think the risks are.
Thank you. Okay, what type of tools should I definitely learn in 2024, 2025 if I want to update my knowledge?
Again, it depends where you are on your knowledge. I think everyone really should have knowledge of a UI tool, even though I'm saying it's a problem. I still think you need to have, there is a lot of risk on a UI. If you're already in that space, I would definitely say, our systems are becoming distributed, so any tool around HTTP, APIs, is definitely going to be beneficial. We're all talking about integrating AI. Most of it's done via API calls, so getting to know that technology. And then I would say the way websites are going, particularly being component-based, understanding components, how you can test them in complete isolation is going to really be helpful. And then contract testing is probably another one that's creeping in now, because how integrated our systems are and our teams are, we need to make sure we're not breaking other people's work, and contract testing is a good way of doing that.
What's your experience in introducing automated testing? Should it start with an internal initiative or company domain-wide change?
So in my definition of automated testing, I think you can introduce it at any point. I would start by identifying your pain points. What's causing your pain? So in the way you're doing testing, what's causing pain, what's slowing you down, and then ask yourself or ask the team, what ideas have you got for us to improve this? What could we build? What could we do? So I wouldn't immediately start thinking of automated tests per se. It might be the answer. Automated tests might be the answer, because you might be like, well, it's taken Jack 10 days to run these test cases. We want to free up Jack. That makes sense. But then I would look at what Jack's doing, and where's he spending those 10 days? Is it updating the test cases? Is it fighting a loading bug on the website? Try and work out what it is, and then go about introducing software to assist that testing effort. That's where I would start.
Okay, luckily, both screen froze, so I can use the mobile. And the good thing about this is I can ask whatever I want. Because you have no idea what I have in my hand, but don't worry, I'm not... No, don't look there.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, how frequently should we review our tests to avoid false past?
Can you say that again?
Sorry. I know. Sorry?
Can you say it again?
Should I?
Yeah.
How frequently should we review our tests to avoid false?
No, I forgot now. Can you start again? No.
Actually, I lost it. If you're going to
play games with me, no, I'm joking. Right. You should be reviewing them all the time. Basically, we love the word continuous. Continuously, we should be evaluating our tests. Tests are always going to pass and fail. Whenever you get a failing test, that's a great opportunity to look at it and say, is this worth keeping? And also, as you spot bugs, go and have a look at your tests. As your customers complain about certain areas, go and have a look at your tests to see why are they complaining? I thought we tested it. So you should always be aware. And I said it, automated tests, and when they pass, they are influencing your decision making, whether you're aware of it or not. If they all go green, you will test very differently. You will have very different conversations. So you need to know what you're trusting. So you need to trust your tests. You need to know what they're doing. And by knowing what they're doing, you need to regularly review them. And it sounds ridiculous because you could have thousands of them. But over time, you'll start to build up that knowledge. And it is crucial to know what they do.
Okay. Oh my God, this is so stressful. Okay. How can we make test automation a team effort? How to get developers committed to writing unit tests and other tests too? Cool.
I quite like this, but good way of asking questions. You get time to think as the questions coming in. Okay. Unit testing, the best thing I love around unit testing is asking them, how do you know it works? And then you get, oh, well, I wrote it. You know, I know it works. Yeah, but can you prove it? And then they'll run it from the top down. I'm like, yeah, but that function might be making it work. Like, have you tested that function? And then they'll go, oh, right, fine. And then they'll try it. So I like to kind of show them that it might not work as they think. But for them, it's their safety net, right? The last thing they want, right, is for me to come back to their desk and go, it doesn't work. They don't want that. No one wants that. No, like, you know, we always talk about testers being negative, right? But a developer doesn't want that. And if you can teach them a technique or make them aware of a technique that's going to help them, then they're probably going to do it. And then just to be clear as well, I think there's a big distinction between unit testing and TDD. Some developers hate doing TDD. They hate it. But they will quite happily add unit tests retrospectively. I prefer TDD, but those two things are very different. So if you're going to try and influence developers, make sure they're clear. Other types of tests, best thing, pre-planning meetings. If you're not vocal in them, you definitely should be as a quality stroke tester person. Ask this question: how are we going to test this? How are we? Not me. How are we going to test this? And that will usually lead to great conversations about, well, I don't know. It's like, well, I don't know either. Right? So what ideas have you got? And then you can, like, you know, sometimes you can, you know, come out with something crazy, right? Just say something ridiculous, like, you know, we'll write 1,000 UI tests, and the developer will go, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Yeah, it's not, but thank you for engaging. Right, what ideas have you got? So get them involved in the conversation, ask that question, and in an ideal world, what I like to do is then write the tests on the ticket. And say, as a minimum, as a team, we are going to automate these 5 scenarios on these layers, and that's now part of the definition of done for that ticket. So now it doesn't matter who writes them. We've agreed as a team they're getting written. So if the developer wants to write it, happy days. If they don't, you'll write it. And if that doesn't happen, start pairing. Encourage pairing. Try and pair with them. Try and work together.
I have good news for you. You don't need to listen to what I say anymore because it's written there. Yeah, it's cool. What's your take on automated testing in mobile game industry with proprietary game engine?
I do not have an awful lot of knowledge on it, but there is a fantastic Finnish tester. Well, I think she lives in Finland now, called Ru Sidra. I'm going to get her name. Sidrea. Yeah, Ru Sidrea. She's blogged lots about testing mobile apps, especially specifically games. I think it's a very complex space, but I have seen really cool videos of people, and I know I've been a skeptic of AI, but I've seen really cool videos of people having AI characters in these games, and they just go around, and they put hundreds of thousands of them into these games, and then you just walk through the world and see, like, you know, characters walking up walls and going, well, that's not meant to happen. And then they go over here and see someone stuck in a bin or whatever. So I think there's lots of really interesting things happening in those spaces. But yeah, the engines themselves, again, it's also a point of responsibility, right? The engine ideally should work. I say that should work, but can you fix it if the engine doesn't do what it's meant to do? If not, try and test the layer above, and then obviously report issues to the engine provider. But yeah, I would check out Ru's work. She's done great stuff in there.
Okay, 1 or 2 more questions. What's the name of that tool vendor? Purple little face. I think that's the little devil. I'm not sure.
As someone who's like entering the independent world again, I'm not going to say. They're American. That's as much as I'll give you.
That's it. All right, then we have, I'm pretty sure I just read a URL for automation in testing. Is this a resource that you created?
It's automationintesting.com, but it will be taken down soon for multiple reasons. But yeah, everything I will do will go back to my own blog, which is thefriendlytester.co.uk. And then hopefully by the start of next year, richardbradshaw.com will be created. But yeah, if you want to keep track of anything I do, or LinkedIn is the best place to do that.
3 more. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, go for it.
What can be the steps/thoughts to identify a test that needs to be changed even if it's passed?
Even if it's passed? So again, does it fill you with confidence is another way. So it has passed, but do you still feel confident that it's done what you want it to do? I would definitely listen to your gut feel on some of those things. But I think, again, Manoj mentioned earlier between rewriting and refactoring. I think that's an interesting distinction to look at. Sometimes we need to rewrite a test because it's not testing the right thing. And that literally, you know, sometimes we talk about fixing tests a lot, but most of the time you're not fixing it, you're rewriting it. It's a completely different test. Like fixing a test would be a few small changes. Most of the time, we're actually rewriting or creating a brand new test. It's very rare that we fix a test. And then sometimes we, I can't see now.
Funny people.
I'll keep answering, I don't mind. I'll be here. I'm here till Friday, Saturday, so I've got loads of time.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that, really.
Then the other side of it is, as I said, like refactoring a test. So, as you're refactoring your framework, you should potentially look at improving the test there. So again, it's more, so one massive difference is the test you wrote at the start of your job will look very different to the test you're writing 6 months, 10 months in. So that's another reason to go back. As your coding improved or your understanding of the tooling improved, go back and refactor for that reason.
I'd kindly ask someone to take Sophie's phone away from her, please. Thank you. What is the most secure element that the API needs to have during the first login step?
In my app, in that test app is not secure in the slightest. But yeah, I can't answer that one. I would say whatever security token you're using.
I'm so scared to stay on the stage. We need to stop now. This is going to go crazy.
Last night we played PowerPoint karaoke. They're doing it in real life. So these people, right, these people that you see on this screen, these people here, right, they think that a power cut during a keynote is not enough torture for me.
They have no idea what's going on here, trust me. The free Sophies, again, 10 out of 10. Okay, look, I went back there when you did this heroic event, what you did, and I tried to find an appropriate gift for you to say thank you, and this is a box of tissues.